Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hammer Podcast. Today is the 16th of January, 2023. We are speaking with Scott. Scott went to the Aspen Achievement Academy in, let's see, what years was that, Scott?
That was 1995. I was 13 years old.
1995. Okay. So we're going to give Scott a chance to tell his story. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment so you can see how we're doing. So go ahead, Scott. Go ahead and start from the beginning there and tell us.
Okay. Well, I'll take you back in time here. So
Sure.
I grew up in Newport Beach, California. And I guess you would say, nice house and everything, but fairly neglected. Not a lot of time or attention. So the way I dealt with that as a kid was, I would act up and try to get my attention that way. Because in general, you'd rather get yelled at than get ignored.
Like every kid.
Yeah. So by the time you get into adolescence, you start taking bigger and bigger risks. So I was drinking and smoking weed, and I was never a violent kid or doing anything crazy like that. But it got to the point where my parents didn't want to deal with me anymore. So yeah, that was the first place I was sent. Right before I went to Aspen was in Kansas, because these places they charged. I think Aspen at the time was about $40,000. And your insurance was willing to pay for it, but you had to have a psychiatric diagnosis first.
Okay.
Sure. So they'd force you through a psychiatric evaluation. And they have those things in place in Utah, and that's what most of the kids went through. Everyone comes out with a psychological evaluation. It's not, I'm sure you're aware. It's
yes.
Kind of it's a pseudoscience. Anyway, my parents decided to put me in Kansas. My mom I don't know. She found the top mental institution in the country and put me in there. But I was a kid. I was little, and I was smoking weed and what have you. But it was really, really scary because I'm in a full, it's a full-on padded rooms. I was by myself, and it wasn't really explained to me what was going on. But it's a full-on mental institution. They had me in there for 3 weeks, got some sort of diagnosis, but like I said, I was a perfectly normal kid. It's just no one was really paying attention to me.
You were probably thinking to yourself, why am I here? I'm not crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not crazy, but at the same time, I understood I could never really do anything right. It was like home life was a toxic environment, to say the least. So some of this was a blessing in some way. And Aspen, I think similar to a lot of other kids' stories, you go from there and you're not really told what you're getting yourself into. I was told I was going to summer camp and that there'd be some kind of therapy or help involved or whatever. But, from there I was put from Kansas after being there for a month. I was put on an airplane straight to Salt Lake City while, my parents were already at home. So I was flew to Salt Lake City by myself, was greeted by 2 escorts that worked for Aspen at the airport, kind of these mid-20s, grungy, sort of backcountry looking guys. Yeah. But it's weird who takes these jobs because they don't pay very well, you can imagine. It's just, whoever's desperate enough to take the job, basically. So these 2 guys put me in a Suburban. We go and pick up a few other kids from the Provo Canyon area. And then they take us in the Suburban, probably 5-6 hours up into central Utah, which is, it's like polygamy country back that way.
Mormons.
Like fundamentalists, backwoods, really, really small towns. So, the women with the dresses and all that stuff. Anyway, they take us to like this, it's like a base camp situation where they have their headquarters and they gear you up. You get a backpack. I'm sorry, you don't get a backpack. You get a tarp and a sleeping bag and a couple of t-shirts and hiking boots and socks and a knife. And, like I said, I've been to summer camp before. I was told I was going to summer camp, and already kind of alarm bells are going off in my head because these guys aren't making eye contact with you. Not giving you information is a big part of the way they mess with your head, right?
Right.
Any questions you ask, their answer is pretty much no future information. They just kind of don't tell you anything and leave you in the dark as much as they can.
Or try to be as vague as they can.
Right. So you don't really, and that mess. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, how far do we have to hike today? No future information. So you're just going to be hiking and hiking. And mentally, it kind of breaks you down a little bit.
Sure.
But so that's first day. They take you to the base camp. The guy takes, one man takes me by. So I'm by myself with a grown man downstairs. He makes you strip naked. and squat in the corner and cough. And again, right off the bat, I'm like, this is like no summer camp I've ever been to, you know? Like, what
Yeah,
the fuck is going on?
sounds like prison. Yeah.
It's creepy and weird, and it's you know, not. Oh, I just wasn't prepared for it. But I think, again, like I said, that's part of their game. But you don't need to spend the night in that place. Because I asked the guy when he handed my sleep bag, like, is this where I'm going to be sleeping? And he's like, he looks away and doesn't really respond. So then they put us back in the Suburban and take us off into the woods. You know, now you're in the National Forest or on the BLM, and you're just hiking, you know, every day, all day. The first 3 days they call it impact, so there's, you know, they're breaking you in a little bit.
Okay.
So they give you like, I don't know, a Ziploc, like a sandwich-sized bag full of dried granola, and I think we got a banana the first day, and that's pretty much all you get for food in the first 3 days. And they're hiking you, you know, 15 miles a day up hills and through the desert. Not a lot of water either. So that, I mean, I was littler than a lot of the other kids there. I was also, you know, on these medications that my parents put me on, which makes everything just that. I mean, I was Adderall and other shit like that. Just didn't make it any easier to deal with, I don't think. But anyway, that was 2 months long. Do you want me to focus mostly on Aspen or go through? I mean, I went through a bunch of these different places, which were sort of similar.
Well, if you could kind of touch on you know, your journey to Aspen, yeah, that'd be fun.
Well, Aspen, like I said, was sort of the beginning of it.
Okay,
but I could spend most of the time talking about that, or I spent a lot more time in other places.
Okay,
like Oregon.
We could touch on all of them. You know, we can focus a little bit on Aspen.
Let me get through it, and I'll try to give you a piece of each one of them and bring you through it a little bit.
Sure.
So like I said, I was in Aspen, and I was still basically a little kid. Like most of these people are 16 and 17. They're a lot more physically ready for it. And I ended up doing fine with the physical part because I'm a pretty tough-minded and physically tough kid. But remember one story, you know, because it's survival stuff. Like you don't have backpacks, like I already mentioned. You have a tarp and you have your gear.
Right.
You wrap your gear up with your tarp and you throw it on your back, and it's like a survival pack. You're making fires with sticks and all that. And in some sense, you gain some useful skills and confidence toward life that way, because you never really get challenged like that, you know, coming from wherever it is most of us come from.
Right.
So it gives you a confidence going forward in life, which is probably one of the good parts of it.
Plenty of exercise too, you know.
Plenty of exercise too, and plenty of fresh air. And that's, you know, again, my house wasn't a healthy environment to begin with, so it's a shitty option, and it's sad that it exists. It is really, really abusive. I remember well, you probably can't see it too well on the screen, but I've just about chopped this finger off when we were out there.
Okay.
I was about a month in, and they have us making these traps, Paiute deadfall traps, with basically a giant flat rock. You set it up with a trigger and cordage and what have you. And I was trying to cut one of the smaller pieces to fit in the trap. And instead of cutting it, I just cut my finger. It was dangling, you know, by a thread. I cut about halfway through the bone. Oh. And there's blood flowing everywhere. And I go over to one of the counselors, and I'm pale at this point because I'm in shock. And what should I do about this? And the counselor says, go put your finger in the stream because, you know, it's cold water. It'll probably help coagulate. But they tell me, you know, they're threatening because the kids will do shit like this on purpose to get out of the program or get out of hiking, you know. So they'll tell me, you know, if I do that again, they're going to take my knife away and put me on like restrictions and shit like that. But they didn't call anybody to help or anything. It was about maybe 5 days later before every couple of weeks, someone would come out to resupply us. And so we'd meet up with them somewhere. So about 5 days later, they had somebody else look at it, and it was pretty damn infected. I was gonna say,
lost the finger. No antibiotics, no nothing like that.
Nothing. It was filthy. Oh my hand. I mean, we cleaned it up a little bit, but so it was. But it was also, you know, already starting to heal and coagulate, so it's too late to really stitch it either. So they got me to the clinic. They took me to the town. You know, I was gone for a half a day, and they put some butterfly bandages on it, but. Yeah, I permanently damaged the nerves of my finger there. But, you know, stitches have to be done in the first 24 hours or so.
Okay.
Anyway, so, yeah, that place we hiked, I think all together, when you added it up, it was closer to 600 miles. It was about a 60-day program. And pretty well suffering throughout. Yeah, it was painful. It was they aren't nice to you. Like, there's a lot of toothless rednecks that work there. It's like they just don't have any. No one has any official training to really help anybody.
Right.
But I was there in the summer. We got hit by. I tell you, I got hit by lightning when I was there. We used to get hit by regular monsoons because we were out there in the in the Wasatch, and in the summer you get these monsoons off the Sea of Cortez. They come up in the afternoon and they come on you pretty quickly. And the only really safe place to be in a lightning thunderstorm like that is in your car because your tires are insulated from the ground.
Right.
But we're out there hiking around nowhere within a week's hike of a car. So you get these storms that would roll in. And one time we were hiking along, and lightning striking all around us. I mean, it's you hear lightning start to count, and every second is supposedly a mile or something. But when you're hearing the lightning and hearing the thunder and seeing the lightning simultaneously, it's right on top of you. And one of these bolts must have hit the ground 5 feet away from us, knocked us all out like bowling pins. And I have no recollection of hitting the ground, but we're lucky no one was killed. It happened more than once.
It just hit around
And
you. It didn't hit you directly.
I don't think it hit anybody on the head, no. But
Okay.
it hit enough voltage to make us black out. Like a group of 10 of us. We were all on the ground.
A lot of voltage.
Yeah, and hail hitting bouncing off the ground and cutting your face and stuff like that. You're pretty undersupplied. And I actually found the mountains for myself as an adult. I really enjoy it, but on my own terms with my own gear and doing what I want to do. But yeah, that was an experience to say the least.
And how long
from there,
how long were you in that wilderness environment?
60 days.
60 days.
So
okay.
You don't see a paved road the whole time. You don't really cross. We didn't spend much time on actual trails. We were bushwhacking. You go from the desert to the high alpine and then back to the desert, really. You go up and down and just around in circles.
Right.
It was awfully pretty.
No bears?
Couple run-ins with grizzly bears, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Bear one time, because, we'd hang our food up at night over the tree. That works pretty well. Because grizzlies don't climb trees very well. Black bears do. But we didn't have a lot of choices in this camp. There was mostly just dead trees. So we did our best to find a good one. And about 2 a.m, this grizzly looked at our little setup and it decided it wanted the food. So instead of trying to climb the tree, it just gave it a shove and snapped the tree in half like a toothpick. And it was loud. It woke us up.
Oh,
and us waking up was enough to scare the bear away. But you had those solos. I'm sure you've heard about the solos.
Oh, yeah.
Put you in a little designated 12 by 12 camp area. One of my solos, I did have a large animal come up on my camp when I was in a sleeping bag. I heard it breathing. I was too scared to really look and see what it was. But, that's just another kind of torture method to keep you alone with yourself. And you did 3 of those while you were in Aspen during that 60-day stretch. The first one is 2 days. The second one is 3 days. And I think the third one is 5 days. And then between all the other places as I went, I probably did another 6 or 7 solos. If you add them all up, I probably did 9 or 10 fucking solos.
Yeah, that kind of screws
just mentally.
Yeah, screws with the mind a little bit.
It does, but I kind of just have this mental. I don't know. I'm a pretty strong-minded kid, and maybe that's one reason I got more abuse than any other kids in my family, because that seems to happen. With the dysfunctional family, they tend to target the strongest one. For whatever reason, I've been able to handle it. My sister, not so much. She's a mess, unfortunately. But yeah, so anyway, I finished up that Aspen situation. I came home. My parents had me in what's like basically an outpatient. Still not a normal situation, but I was at home. But they had me going to AA meetings basically as a form of daycare. Like I said, I drank maybe 2 or 3 times at this point in my life. I like to smoke weed, but that was the only thing that calmed me down. They had me on Adderall from the time I was 6. So smoking weed was a real relief once I found it, my adolescent years.
Sure.
But my mom especially is pretty anti. But
it's a lot safer than Adderall. Say that.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, that's my background with drugs and alcohol at that point in time is why I bring it up. Because she had me going to AA like pretty much every day. Like the maid would pick me up from school, drop me off at the AA club, and I'd sit with, I don't know, homeless people smoking cigarettes, and it was weird. And then they'd get off work. My parents, I was kind of a latchkey situation, right? So they'd get off work like 5 or 6 o'clock, and then pick me up, bring me home, and that was how I spent my days at that age of 13, you know, after finishing the Aspen and the mental health thing. That only lasted about 3 or 4 months before things were falling apart again. So that's when I was told by my parents we were going to go out for breakfast one morning. And they, instead of taking me to breakfast, they put me on an airplane and sent me to Oregon and put me at a place called Bachelor Academy. I don't know if you've heard about this one, but
No,
it was shut down it was shut down in 2009 for child abuse by the Oregon DOCS.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, it was a pretty awful place. It was one of these long-term places, and as emotional growth boarding school, it's in the same model of like CEDU or Cascade School. So they have these life steps, you know, they have these things called life steps, and every 3 months or so, you go through one of them. They lock you. Oh shit! There you are. Sorry.
There you go. It's all right.
They lock you in a room and don't let you sleep for like 3 days. And each time you go through it, you know, there's different things. And of course, there's groups that you go through like 3 times a week, about half a day. There isn't really much for school involved. I mean, you're really not in school for the most part. But
well, you were.
So I remember like the first.
You were like 13 or 14. You had to.
I was still 13. Yeah, they have some curriculum, but I'm just saying it's not what you're there doing.
Okay. All right.
Like you get in trouble. Okay, so here's the deal. Like you would pretty much refuse the entire program, but there's worse alternatives, right? You've heard of like Island View and some of these other more locked up facilities. And then there's also always the wilderness program, right? Because it's also owned by the same company that owns Aspen. So if you fuck around too much, they'll send you to the wilderness program for 2 months. You do that over again. Then they send you back and you start over again. It extends your sentence, right? So that's your real motivation for not refusing the program completely. But yeah, I remember getting there the first week and they have these groups and like, there's a lot of screaming going on back and forth, a lot of screaming at the kids. Like the adults would just shout and scream and swear and threaten. And they do this stuff. I remember, I think it was like my 3rd or 4th group before I saw what they called anger work. And anger work was somebody would be angry about something, I don't know, from their childhood. And the group would say, you count to 3, it'd say 1, 2, 3. And then everyone in the group, probably 12 or 15 of us, would scream at the top of their lungs, ah, like that. And then the focus of the anger work would continue with the screaming, fuck you, mom, fuck you, ah, losing their mind, drooling, screaming, snot coming out, bursting blood vessels in their nose. I mean, just completely losing it. And then breaking down in a heap of tears. And then, you know, the whole group, they had these things called smush piles where everyone would lay on top of each other. And you'd have like these grown men staff members with like 14-year-old girls laying on their lap, like stroking their hair and shit. Like there was a lot of abuse going on there. But so the life steps were like what supposedly is going to change you. But they're like, they co-opted these like communist torture methods, right? Where sleep deprivation and getting you to inform on yourselves and others, right? Like they have these things called dirt lists. And they lock you in these rooms and they say, all right, give me a dirt list. I don't care how small it is. If you, anything, we want to hear about anything and everything you've ever done wrong before. And since you've been here. And by the way, since you're in this room making this list, we're having the rest of the school make lists at the same time. And if something that is not on your list is on somebody else's list, then you're going to be in big fucking trouble, right?
Oh boy.
But if you confess to everything, then you'll be given leniency, right? But they'll still fuck you pretty hard, even if you do confess on yourself. It's really usually not a good idea. The best thing to do is just not tell anybody about anything. But you can't really get into that serious of trouble while you're there anyway, unless you're going to get violent with somebody or stupid.
Or they could just make stuff up on the dirt list.
Yeah, that's happened too. But so like I said, they lock you in these rooms and they do these kind of pseudo, I don't know, it's like these weird boomer methods, you know, like they play the same hokey songs over and over again. Like for like hours and hours and hours and hours, like Guantanamo. And like I said, they don't let you sleep maybe an hour a night for like 3 or 4 or 5 days on end. And they're in there fucking with you pretty hard. They're making you do weird shit. They call them like bioenergetics, I think. And it'd be physical along with like the screaming. Like they'd hold you down under a sheet and you'd have to like struggle to try to escape. But like everyone in the
Oh
group is
man.
like holding the sheet down on top of you, right? While you're like inside sweating. I don't know if it's supposed to sort of replicate childbirth in some way, but it's really traumatic. I don't know.
Well, what if you're claustrophobic?
I mean, you can probably see me talking about. I still have a lot of PTSD. I'm 40 years old.
Right.
I've overcome a lot of this. I took a lot of this out of myself in my early 20s. I had no fucking self-esteem. I thought there was something wrong with me. But I was at that place in Oregon for 2 full years before, and this was in like 97.
Is that the Mount Bachelor Academy?
Mount Bachelor Academy, yeah.
Okay.
That was out there in the woods and in the forest in eastern Oregon, kind of by Bend. And then so one of the staff members reported the place. There was a bunch of sexual abuse going on there. But that wasn't when it got shut down. I think it shut down for a dozen years later.
Right.
One of the kids came back and sued as an adult and got the place shut down.
Well,
but
if you got girls crying on guys' lap, they're stroking their hair.
That's a sign right there. So gnarly. There's so many creepy fucks, man. It's crazy. I mean, they employed like half of the town nearby. I tried to escape, a few times, but you're like 20 miles away from the nearest town. And like I say, half the town works for this place. The cops will have ATVs and dogs out there looking for you. And you're still in the middle of nowhere and you don't know anybody. I mean, it might as well be a wilderness program, but there aren't really any fences per se, but you feel really powerless. Because when you're 13 and you're told something's 2.5 years long, that might as well be a 30-year sentence. You don't have a lot of perspective on what the long term is at that age. A week is like a year when you're that age. So I was there for 2 years. I didn't exactly finish because about 3 months before I was going to finish, my parents pulled me out because of all the accusations that were going on. But I still didn't come home. I went. I got sent directly from Oregon to a place in Phoenix called St. Paul's Academy. And this place was in a pretty shitty neighborhood. It was a pretty shitty place. It was an all-boys academy. Uh-huh. It wasn't quite as weird with the emotional growth stuff. They didn't lock us in rooms and sleep deprive us. But they did scream at us a lot. It was a pretty shitty place to be. I have to say I didn't like it very much. So I was in Phoenix there for a year. And that was my sophomore year in high school now. So I went from... This started when I was in seventh grade, right? So now we're already up to 10th grade. Well, I'm already 4 years in and I've been to like 5 places, right? And so after 10th grade, I was given, they let me come home for my junior year. I went back to the public school and I still had some friends. My junior year, that was like, I spent just the first semester back at the school, for my home school there that I grew up near, which was really nice. I just was trying to put all that shit behind me and be as normal as possible, as amazing I even got through it, let alone still more or less sort of normal. I guess we're all sort of normal, that's the best you could hope for.
Yeah, as normal as you can be,
Right. I was still doing pretty good. I was getting in trouble, but I'm 16 years old and that's just sort of my nature. But smoking weed, nothing crazy. Like I said, I was never a violent kid. I never did anything crazy, but so I did that first semester. So I got Christmas break now, my junior year. My parents tell me that I'm going snowboarding in Utah. So they take me to Utah to go snowboarding. And guess who gets left in Utah? No, this time, yeah, it was pretty dick move, man. I would tell all my buddies at home, dude, I'm going snowboarding. It's going to be sick. And then they never come home. And so now I'm at this place in Utah. It's called the Oakley School, and it's owned by the same people that. Yeah, it's owned by the same people that own Island View. My mom to be honest with you, my mom is Munchausen's by proxy, right? And that's really what all this is. She's just trying to control and fix things around her all the time, and she's not really aware of it. So it's unfortunate. I was sort of an experiment. I got put on a lot of different medications during all this too. It was like no one really gave a shit, man. If I would have just had one person that cared and listened to me, which I ultimately found, as an adult in a romantic relationship, with the love of a strong woman, and eventually she's like, what the fuck happened? Because for a long time I didn't really understand it either. How could I? It started when I was 4 years old, right? So I was at this place, Oakley School, and I had a buddy send me some weed from home, and I got in trouble with the weed. They kicked me out of the school, and I went to Hazelton in Minnesota. So yeah, so now I'm in like drug rehab. Like I'm in
Uh-huh.
like hardcore drug rehab, dude. Like I mean, it's for 14 to 25-year-olds. I'm 16 now, and I'm like this little pothead surfer kid from Newport Beach. And
Wow.
it was not a good place. 30-day rehab. It was, and I think the place in Utah said if I completed this 30-day rehab, they would take me back. So I did this 30-day rehab. It really was not a good place for me because I didn't fit in there. A lot of these people were there trying to really say they needed help. They were trying to say that they're addicted to heroin or crack or whatever, and maybe they're looking at prison time. And I'm like I said, like a little pothead, like not taking it seriously, but I just had a hard time fitting in there because
Sure.
it was a different element completely. And so it messed with my self-esteem a lot because these places will completely isolate you if you're not like playing that's their game. They turn everyone against you. Like I remember that place about Bachelor in Oregon, the thing they would do if you got in the least bit of trouble, it was called a self-study. So if you got on a self-study, what they would do is you're not allowed to talk to anybody. Nobody's allowed to talk to you. You're not allowed to make eye contact with anybody. Nobody's allowed to act like you exist or vice versa. And if
Okay.
you do or they do, then it's called breaking bans. And if you break bans, then you get in more trouble. But when you're on a self-study, you come down for breakfast and you sit at your desk facing the wall and you write essays that they give you. They give you prompts about what you're supposed to write about, right? You just sit there writing this stupid thing. And then after you eat breakfast, you go to work project. And work project could be anything. One of the most popular things for a work project, because this place was a campus with all gravel roads. So they'd have you gravel the roads. So you take a fucking giant pile of gravel, you take a wheelbarrow, you shovel gravel into the wheelbarrow and you wheel it to where it needs to go. You dump it out, you use a rake and spread the gravel around. And you do that all day like you're in a fucking chain gang in Alabama. I mean,
So,
and I'm like little kid, and then you get a break for lunch, and you go and do it again all afternoon, and then you sit and you eat dinner, and then you sit the rest of the night facing the wall writing more freaking essays. And you do that every day for weeks. I saw him have kids dig huge ditches and then fill them back in, just like Cool Hand Luke, just to prove they can make you
yeah.
do it,
You know what they say
So that's how all these,
the definition of insanity, you know, is doing the same
yeah,
thing over and over again, expecting different results. So,
yeah. So, okay, so now I'm at this drug rehab place in Minnesota. I finished the 28 days or whatever. It was not good, but then I went back to the place in Utah. Yeah, I started over at that place. And then I got in trouble there because I got caught packing a dip. Tobacco. I had like some skull. I got off another kid, and I got in trouble because they saw my spit cup. So they kicked me out because I was already on thin ice, right? They didn't like me. And then from there, I went to a place called Wilderness Treatment Center in Montana, which is that's another
wow.
drug rehab. That's a
Wow.
60-day drug rehab in the wilderness, but that also has a wilderness program component to it, right? There's like a
Uh-huh.
3-week wilderness trip mixed into it, and you're doing ranch work and building fences. And again, it's a hardcore rehab that I really have no business being at because I'm not a hardcore drug addict. Never really was.
Where was this located?
Um, it's up near like Billings, Montana, in
Okay.
the
Montana. Okay.
mountains. Yeah, in Montana. The
Okay.
wilderness trip was in Glacier National Park, and that was a pretty area to take a wilderness trip. And by now, I'm getting plenty of wilderness experience under my belt. Right, I'm like a seasoned mountaineer. I'm getting good at this shit. So it's not hard for me. I mean, I've been through it so much. You just never know what to expect. You always got your guard up, man. But like
Yeah.
you just roll with it. What the fuck else can you do? And it ain't like being in prison. Being in prison, you keep your head down and you do your time. These places did not let you do that. They'll constantly fucking with you, right? You're constantly getting screamed at and forced to talk about shit and poked and prodded and conflict with these other kids. And it's like, it's a gnarly environment. So from there, I finished that place. I came home back to Newport I did outpatient rehab. They put me in an outpatient rehab after I got out of there. I was in outpatient rehab for about 6 months doing weekly drug tests, and I failed a few of them. And after I failed, the last one or whatever, they put me in a place called Phoenix House. I don't know if you've ever heard of Phoenix House.
No, I've never heard of it.
It's in Santa Ana, in the ghetto, basically, in like a really shitty neighborhood, and it's not the kind of place people usually pay to go to. It's the kind of place the judge orders you to go to. So I was like the
Okay.
only white kid there. There's a lot of gang, like mostly Mexican gangbang, or I mean, they're kids. Most of them are probably wannabe gangbangers.
Sure.
Some gangbangers, but just a different element than kind of what I was used to. You know, these other places like no Bachelor's like 50,000 a year. It's all a bunch of rich kids being neglected by their parents. This place, these kids are also neglected by their parents, but in a different way. You know, it was pretty horrible. Phoenix House is what's like behavior modification, right?
Okay.
It's not Minnesota. It's not Minnesota model. It's not 12-step based. It's behavior mod based. So like in your face, prison shit, scream, like a lot of screaming at us, but also nothing really recreational or fun or interesting to do. It was the day to day there was awfully boring and terrible. Like a lot of group and just never a free moment. Shitty food. All these places have shitty food. So yeah,
Hmm.
Phoenix House, finished that place up. Then I went to a place in Denver. My parents felt bad after about 2 months. They started feeling bad. I was in Phoenix House because they're like, "This is a little bit mean of us." so, so, so they took me out of the Phoenix House and put me in a place in Denver. It was called Accelerated Schools, and by this point, man, I'm so I don't know what to make of the world. You know, like I'm just kind of at drift. I'm obviously angry and full of rage, but dealing with it as best I can.
Eight places, I'd be full of rage too. Shipping me back and
Well,
forth,
and
state to state.
and it started before that. Like, you know, like they started me in a school for dyslexic kids when I was in first grade, but I've never been dyslexic. You know, it's just like I said, my mom has Munchausen's. Like, she just can't help it, but she's also not aware of it. It goes back to her childhood, which is unfortunate. But that's just instead of like dealing with it, she had kids of her own and perpetuated this really, really abusive cycle. But yeah, after Denver, I think I went to 5 or 6 more places before it was all said and done. And it was,
Wow.
you know, like I said, in my early 20s, I was still trying to like go to community college, but I didn't have any self-esteem. I thought there was something really wrong with me because, like I said, this all started when I was a little kid and I didn't know anything else. That's what I had always been told.
Did you have a family
So
physician? Did you have a family physician?
not particularly. No, my mom would
Well,
doctor shop a lot.
okay. Well, you were saying that you taking Adderall and stuff. I mean, who was prescribing this
Yeah.
stuff to you? Did they actually take tests, on you?
Yeah.
And
So I had a different bunch of different psychiatrists and psychologists because well, for one thing, I was in so many different states, right? But even
right,
when I was at home, yeah, my mom. I mean, especially back then in the '90s, man, it was like the pharmaceutical companies took so much control and power over in this country, and then the psychiatrists were so
yeah,
eager to just give out the latest thing. And when you got a mom there who's telling them this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, let's try this. There's no real science involved to it. It's kind of
yeah,
crazy. By I know I took so many different drugs that way. You know, like my brain chemistry at this point. I mean, I'm all right, but it certainly wouldn't be the same. You know, like enough to permanently alter me.
sure, sure,
And then the main thing is just the PTSD, because this is the main reason I wanted to come on and do your podcast, because I think it's important to talk about this stuff. For a long time, I was ashamed of it and I wouldn't talk about it. I thought, like I said, there was something wrong with me. And then I realized at a certain point there was nothing wrong with me. I was perfectly fine. I was just seriously abused. Um, and if you don't, if you do block that stuff out and you don't talk about it openly, then there's this giant gap in your life, right? And that leads to a ton of PTSD and the self-destructive behaviors that follow. You know,
sure. But
so
even talking about it, I mean, doesn't that kind of bring it back? You know,
it does.
take for instance a heroin addict. Okay, they get the
Yeah,
heroin addict, they put him in rehab, and the only thing they do is talk about their addiction. They talk about it, and all it does, it just like it makes them crave it again. You know what I mean? I
yeah.
don't
The
I don't know. I
rehab
mean, it
scene
just
is a scummy scene, man. And I know it's
I'm
only
sure it
gotten worse
is.
since I was involved in it. But what a bunch! I mean, there's a special place in the darkest circles of hell for anyone that participated in this type of shit. You know, anyone, especially the salespeople that were making freaking commissions. You know, and these kids they're getting in there, like duping the. I hate to say
Yeah.
they're duping the parents because ultimately it's the parents' fucking fault. And still to this day, I can't speak to my parents. I don't have a relationship with them because, you know, they're super defensive and sensitive about it. And
Sure.
if I bring any of this stuff up, I don't bring it up to be a dick, and I don't bring it up because I need a verbal apology. I need a verbal apology because they continue doing the same shit, right? They continue acting the same way. And we have very different versions about the reality of what my entire life was like. So, yeah, it's a shame.
I mean,
But I do.
did any of these places? I mean, did they, beat the shit out of you? Did they leave marks? Did they leave scars? Besides the cut finger, of course. I mean, anything you could show your parents. Like, look, this is what they did. Look at this scar I have, or look at this cut, or this broken bones, or something.
Yeah, you know what the reality is? There's nothing I can show them that they won't just scoff at it. I mean, the place has literally been condemned by the state and shut down and closed for child abuse. What more evidence do you need?
Right.
But they roll their eyes and they'll be like, "Oh, these just being dramatic or what." They just don't want to hear it. The reality is they're super freaking narcissistic. Like they just don't care. Like it's like, yes, like I said, the reason I bring it up isn't because I need some cathartic apology. It's because I do desire a relationship with my parents. And this shit needs to be clear. We need to clear the air a little bit before we can actually have a meaningful conversation about anything. We can sit around and talk about the Lakers. Like, who gives a shit about the Lakers, dude? Fuck you guys.
Yeah. I mean, some parents. I mean, some of the other troubled teen homes that I've interviewed people from. Some parents are just they know they did wrong. Right. But they just can't look at their kid and go, I screwed up. They can't do it. Like you said, narcissistic. It's just like I'm just gonna hope it goes away. I'm just gonna turn
generation, man. A lot of big egos.
Yeah. There are some parents though that have actually apologized. I mean, it's not all of them.
And that would mean the world to me, man. To be honest with you, I mean,
yeah.
If they said it and meant it, like I've had half-assed apologies, like I'm sorry if I did anything to hurt you. I'm like, no, you just said if I did anything. Tell me what you did and tell me you're not going to fucking do it again, because to this day they haven't changed a bit. And so that's the reality of it. It's like, fine, it hurts, but what am I really missing out on? I haven't really had that much of a relationship with them ever. So, but yeah, I got a beautiful wife. I got 2 beautiful kids. I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I got a successful practice. So they did some things right. I'm doing pretty well. I'm a really happy person in general.
That's good.
I get to have a lot of fun. I like to do a lot of mountain climbing, snowboarding, surfing, fishing. Well, I live a really blessed life, to be honest with you.
When it comes to wilderness, you're an expert.
Yeah, exactly. and in a lot of ways, like I said, I rebelled against that. After I finished that fucking trip, I told myself I would never, want to go camping ever again. But then as I got to be an adult, I realized, like I said, you can do it on your own terms with your own gear. Sure. And you can go snowboarding and bring a bag of weed with you. And it's an awful lot of fun. And, having gone through those experiences gives me the confidence to fall back on, that no matter what the circumstance arises, I pretty much can solve the problem.
You made it this far.
So, yeah, and that's a gift. To be honest with you, not a lot of people, if you don't pick that up at an early stage in life, it's pretty hard to as an adult. So I'm grateful for that. It's made me a pretty interesting person. And like I said, I do have a lot of fun. So, yeah, did you have any questions for me?
I'm just kind of shocked at how many places you were at. I mean, it's
it was a wild ride, to say the least. Like I said, I ended up homeless. Like in my early 20s, I ended up homeless. Just for a couple years, because my parents were always willing to help support me as long as I was in college. After all this shit was said and done with, they wanted me to graduate college.
Sure.
So they paid for all their kids' college. As long as I was in school, they'd be willing to pay. But, I do the thing where you sign up for school and then you're not really in school. And then they kind of support paying your rent. And then they realize that you're not in school and they stop paying your rent. And then you're homeless. So I ended up living out of my car, bouncing around from couch, surfing from couch to couch. And kind of went through this stage where I was like, fuck you guys, I don't need you. But I wasn't ready to do that. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't, I was still kind of a disorganized little shit, with no self-esteem because of all the shit I'd been through. Right, I didn't really
Right.
have a childhood. I didn't really have a chance to grow up.
Did you ever
So I was
go ahead. Go ahead.
doing drugs at that. I was doing drugs at that time. I was like, probably I was smoking meth and uh, drinking, and I mean, I was just smoke weed, but the meth thing was not something I was proud of. It's not something that's good for anybody.
No,
And
it's
it got a
not.
little out of hand. That stuff will get away from you pretty quickly. It's a powerful one. So I was going down a really shitty and scary road with no real vision of a way out of it. I did that for more than a year. And I'm lucky I survived it. I was hanging out with some sketchy people. And then at a certain point, I got so just sick and tired of it. I was like, what the fuck am I doing, man? I got rich parents that'll pay for anything if I just go to college. So I knew as a last ditch effort, if I reached out to them and said I wanted to go to rehab, that they would go send me to rehab, So that was the last time I did. That was the last time I went to rehab. I ended up going to like a sober living home back in the Newport Beach area. Did my deal there, got myself a job, got myself steam back, figured out what was going on with myself. Like, dude, what? I need to stop being an idiot. I'm 23 years old. I'm in good shape. Nothing physically wrong with me. I'm intelligent. I got these resources. I got parents that are willing to pay for my college. Why am I so
Squandered it. Yeah.
miserable? Well, yeah, why am I should just take advantage of what I have despite all the trauma and shit that happened, behind me. And that didn't mean that the PTSD was over, that I was even really in touch with shit, but that was the beginning of the process. That's when I really started valuing myself more. Quit smoking cigarettes, quit drinking, obviously quit doing the hard drugs. Started working and working out and getting in really good shape. And if you don't have someone in your life to coach you up and give you the wisdom, I found that Mother Nature will provide it for you if you have the time and the patience to spend.
Right.
And I was given that gift by my parents, like I said, because they were willing to pay for college, and I drew it out a little bit. But I also went to chiropractic school. That was, a decade later, I became a doctor. So pretty cool how it works
Great.
out.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Did you ever see anybody during your times at these places? Did you ever see anybody get abused physically, emotionally?
Well, I mean, certainly when I was at the psych ward, these are the type of kids, like I said, you got rubber rooms, right? And these kids, some of them are a danger to themselves and a danger to other people. And they'd lose it. They go nuts. And then have these big Samoan guys that would, I see these little skinny 16-year-old girl get clotheslined really hard by like a 320-pound Samoan guy and just knocked on her head pretty hard. I watched my roommate almost cut his heart out with a butcher knife. That was an interesting night. That was at the place in Oregon. See, and that's the other thing about these places, that they're not equipped to handle people that really need help, right? Like I said, the majority of us there were there because our parents were neglecting us. We were acting up and our parents didn't want to deal with it, and they could afford to write a check. So that's what they chose to do. But there were quite a few kids there that had serious problems that really did need professional help, and they weren't getting it. Because like I said, they'll hire any toothless redneck from down the street that's willing to take $10 an hour.
Sure.
So they don't have any qualified. There's no doctors or anybody qualified working there to help these people. And my roommate this particular night decided, he just kind of snapped. He went up to the room and with his boots, he kicked a hole in the wall, kind of like the video game Rampage, at the Godzilla. He kicked a hole in the wall that you could walk through. I mean, ceiling to floor with his boot. And I come back into the room after dinner and all that, and we're laying on the bed. He pulls out a 14-inch kitchen knife out from under the bed that he'd stashed away, that he'd stolen. And I'm laying on kind of cornered in my bed, like, oh shit, I hope he doesn't murder all of us. And he's kind of got a big Joker grin on his face. He turns the knife around and he's holding it up to his heart like this,
Oh.
and I'm sitting there in my bed like, and like I said, that guy did need a higher level of care than what that place was able to provide for him,
Yeah.
and that's just as unethical as the fact that they exist in the first place. I remember another kid, his name was Alfredo. He had really severe OCD. I mean, really severe, the type where he'd wash his hands to down to bloody scabs, wash his hands 50 times an hour. You just go in the bathroom, wash them 3 times, walk out of the bathroom, turn around, go right back in. had this compulsion that caused crippling anxiety. He had to open and shut drawers, multiple times. He had to leave the house, come back in the house, open and shut the drawers. I mean, really obvious OCD to anyone with just, the most basic amount of armchair training.
Yeah.
But no one recognized it for what it was, and so they'd treat it as any other disciplinary thing, and they'd scream at him, just, if you do that again, they'd discipline him. They'd make him do work crew and shit. It's like, he can't help it, dude. He needs fucking medication.
Yeah.
But they're screaming at him, and that's not helping. It's like, looking back on it, man, it's like, poor fucking kid. But textbook OCD. I mean, crippling OCD.
Yeah.
And he was always in trouble for it.
Sometimes,
sometimes talk about abusive.
Yeah. Sometimes these doctors will just, when they don't want to deal with it, they'll just throw Medicaid pills at you. Here, just take this, take this, take this.
Yeah, well, especially, where I'm come from in Orange County, California, that's they're kind of known for like these over-medicated soccer moms, and all the kids are on Adderall, and all the moms are on Xanax, and the dads are on freaking Vicodin, and everyone's on freaking over the there's a bunch of like what do they call them? Doc in the box. They just throw scripts out the door. It's a big thing. Everyone's sick and addicted. But yeah, I was on, more medications than placements. I was on 20 or 30 different types of meds. They just kept switching around. Oh, let's try this. Let's try that. No one gave a fuck about me. And if your parents don't give a fuck about you, your parents have money. It's kind of like all these people are vultures, man. They'll take advantage.
Definitely. They'll do anything to try and get you in there to keep you there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I'd like to help. Maybe someday write a book or something. I mean, I know I'm not the greatest storyteller I ever lived. It's kind of hard to squeeze it all in, and also encompass like individual stories from individual places and make it fit into an hour.
Well, you did pretty well.
I can remember.
You did pretty well.
I appreciate that. I remember they did a mock funeral for me at one of these places where they made me lay down. That was at the place in Montana, which again is a drug rehab. And drug rehab, they're always trying to tell you you're going to die. It's like the thing to do. You're either going to die or you're going to go to prison. It's like, we're all going to die, first of all. Second of all, I just smoke weed, man. I'm not going to die. But they had me lay down. They had me lay down in the middle of the room, and everyone had to go around and eulogize me and act like I was dead. And that's supposed to have some profound impact, which again, to do to a 15-year-old could be or would be abusive. But I've been through enough shit, man. I have a pretty thick, strong mental wall that I'm able to hold on, because I don't know, most people wouldn't, man. Like I can't even convey to you like the shit I went through to come out of it okay on the other side is so fucking unlikely. Like the fact that I didn't end up dead or in prison, or somehow otherwise insane, it's just a testament to my strength, man. I don't know. Maybe obviously there's a lot of luck involved. Yes. Maybe someone's watching out for me. I don't know.
I mean, how would it have been if your parents didn't have money, and weren't able to help you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they made that their God, for them, money is we all have a central axiom in life. Even if you're an atheist, you got something that you serve, right? Something that you hold in the highest regard that motivates your decisions and actions. And for my parents, it's money, which it is for a lot of people in that generation. But if you make that your God, it leads to some dangerous things. And they're not. It's all their lies and all their bullshit at this point. Now they're retired. They're still rich, but they're miserable. It's all snapping back to hit them in the face, because that's what happens when you spend your life telling lies and freaking treating people like shit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sweet redemption in that way. I don't like to see them unhappy, but it's like they do deserve it.
I mean, what came out of it? They basically lost their son. They've lost their grandkids.
Everyone else in the family too. Yeah.
It's like
nobody speaks to each other. Everyone hates each other. It's their fucking mess.
Money can't buy that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're anxious. They're depressed, and on paper they should be, walking on the beach, going out to dinner, hanging with friends. Should be super easy. They're retired and they're rich and they live on the beach.
Yeah.
But everything's got to be complicated, because my mom never dealt with that shit from her childhood. Right? It just goes on and on like that.
Munchausen, what is that? Do you know?
Yeah, I'll explain it to you. So there's Munchausen's disease and there's Munchausen's by proxy.
By proxy, yes. I've heard of that one.
I'm sure you're familiar with like what they call a hypochondriac.
Yeah.
So a hypochondriac is just like a super neurotic person who constantly is filled with negative emotion, and they feel like anytime they get a little sniffle or something that they have lymphoma, or they have like the worst case scenario,
Right.
but they really believe it, right? They just psych themselves into being sick all the time.
It's like
and that's a hypochondriac.
It's like seeing those commercials on TV, and they see the side effects and go, "Oh, I must have that disease."
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's a hypochondriac, just a super neurotic personality. Munchausen is a more serious mental disorder, and people will literally break their own limbs because they crave the attention, they crave the sympathy. They just get addicted to all the get well soon cards and shit. So they'll knock their teeth out. They'll damage themselves physically, seriously, and the motivation is different than it is with the former mentioned condition. And then there's Munchausen's by proxy, which is you see fairly commonly with mothers and their children. And rather than that Munchausen's person taking it out on themselves, they do it by proxy, and they take it out on the kid, right? And so mothers have broken their kids' legs, or maybe their kids they're perfectly healthy, but they put them in a wheelchair full time, and they psych the kid into believing they need to be in a wheelchair because they need you're such a brave mom, you have this handicapped kid, right?
Right. Or they poison them that's gradually. Yeah.
Right. That sort of thing. That's Munchausen by proxy, and I'm pretty 100% sure that's a fair diagnosis for what my mom has here. Because it's always if it's not me, if I'm not getting the focus of it, it's somebody else. Right. She can't just be at peace. She's got to be fixing some kind of crisis all the time, or creating one to fix. So, yeah.
Is she? Well, I don't know if you know, but is she on any medication for that, or?
No, that's the other thing. Yes. No, well, it's something that people rarely are going to own up to, and especially someone like her who's got money and control.
Sure.
She's a psychoanalyst. My dad's a corporate attorney. My mom's a psychoanalyst. And again, it's like a psychoanalyst is a good profession for someone like that. She gets to kind of fix and control other people and just not deal with her own shit, but deal with everyone else's shit all the time. Highly intellectual people, but not great parents.
Yeah. Well, Scott, that was amazing story, man. It was.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for listening.
I said, if you write the book, let me know, because I would love to.
Yeah, I gotta find the right person. Yeah, I gotta find the right person to do it with, and figure out the right way to convey the story. Like I said, it's hard for me to even. It comes up, pretty regularly in my life where I think about this stuff, and it's like hitting a wall a little bit. I've dealt with a lot of intensive therapy, EMDR therapy and hypnosis therapy to try to deal with PTSD.
Sure.
But it won't be with me, right? It's just a piece of who I am. And that's why I say it's important to talk about it.
Right.
Because it is a part of who I am, and it's not my fault. I'm okay. You
just move forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good, man. I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you for being on. I appreciate it as well. And I'm sure people that are going to be watching this or that are watching this will be enlightened as well. So, yeah. Scott, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got my number. Reach out anytime.
Yes. Don't leave just yet, okay? Let me end the podcast, and I want to talk with you for a few minutes. I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure you like it, subscribe, and comment. That we could see how we're doing. You can let us know. And if anybody else has been to any of these troubled teen homes or academies or wilderness programs or whatever, give me a text on the number. It's scrolling below, and we'll get you on. All right. So for the Hammer Podcast, I'm Jason. You take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we will see you in the next podcast.